Welcome to the Dental Journeys podcast, brought to you by White Coat Financial. Whether you're a new grad or a seasoned dentist, we're here to share stories of dentists from across Canada, how they got to where they are today, and the strategies that helped them along the way. Plus, we bring in experts from outside of the dental world to share insights on the business and financial side of dentistry, helping you thrive beyond the clinic.
On today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Tejas Patel, a general dentist and clinic owner that focuses on cosmetic dentistry. Dr. Patel has built one of the most recognizable cosmetic dental brands in Texas. And in today's episode, we talked about how he started out as a true general dentist before narrowing his focus and consolidating his practices into a highly successful cosmetic and aesthetic dentistry clinic. We also talk about how he built his own courses and how he's leveraged social media to scale his clinic and attract his ideal patient base. So without further ado, let's get into the journey of Dr. Tejas Patel.
What made you choose dentistry? You could do anything you want in the world. Obviously, if you're Indian, you can only really be a doctor and a lawyer and engineer. But what made you choose dentistry?
So I always knew I wanted to do something to help other people. And so I gravitated towards like medicine. And then, it's so funny because I talked to so many other, like you had mentioned, other colleagues who are Indian or friends who are Indian, and a lot of them didn't have many choices. And my parents were very open, and I kind of naturally gravitated towards healthcare. In high school, I volunteered at a big hospital. Got to kind of see what like physicians did and pharmacists did. And then as I got to college, I started to volunteer in a dental office. And then when I saw what dentists do, I was like, man, this is really interesting. Their schedule seems good. You know, patients are happy. They're interacting with people. And I started kind of gravitating towards dentistry in that way. But again, ultimately it was mostly to be able to do something of service to help other people. And then also I do like the creative aspect. I've always liked art. I grew up watching movies. I love I still collect comic books. I still draw. I love like music. So I have a very creative side to myself, and I thought dentistry allows that creativity. And then on a side note, I never really I didn't have like some lemonade stand when I was growing up, and I know it was never this 5-year-old entrepreneur, anything like that. But you know, the idea of having the flexibility of owning your own business was also appealing, like early on. I would say, you know, as I was in college, trying to think about what I wanted to start to narrow my focus on.
No,
That's
fair.
awesome. That's awesome, Tejas. So I guess obviously people that know you or that have seen you on social media, obviously, you know, you do a lot of cosmetic work, but how did you kind of first get started? Obviously graduated. How did you kind of transition into that? And what was your experience like? Did you start as an associate or did you kind of just jump into ownership right away?
Yeah, I graduated in 2002 in the University of Texas in Houston, and I worked for an associate for probably about 6 months, and then after that, me and my wife, well, prior to that, we knew we were going to move to Austin, so I kind of like just worked somewhere just to hold a position. We moved to Austin. I was an associate for a little bit longer, but within my first year of graduating, I opened my own practice from scratch. And I really thought I would be the last person to do that, like so early. But I had the support of my wife. We were in a new city, and we had a lot going on. I graduated within a year, a year of graduating, opened our business. We were having our first child, moved to a new city where we didn't know anyone, and got like our first home. And so all these things were happening. And so I did associate for a little bit, and then also I continued to associate like part-time while I was trying to build my own business, where I don't know if that's as accessible to a lot of people today, but it definitely was of value to, get some income going while I was trying to build this practice. And to answer the cosmetic part, I initially started off thinking, well, wanting to do like cosmetic dentist. I was like, I'm fresh out of school, so naive, and I was like, I'm gonna be the cosmetic dentist coming out with like, little to no experience, but I had this passion and this dream, and I was gonna be fee for service and all these things of like what I really wanted to do. And then within like 6 or 8 months, I was like, we are not making any money. Like, I felt like, man, like what have I done? And so I started to sign up for insurance plans. And I started to then kind of change course and like establish myself as a family and general dentist. And then I did that for 15 years and then grew to a second location. Actually purchased another practice, which became my second location. Then I bought another practice and bought the records or charts, merged that into my newest location, and then did that for about 5 years. I ran two offices, had associates, multiple hygienists, and just still always did cosmetic, but it was always a smaller part versus the bigger scheme of things. And I always had my hand in cosmetics, but like not as much as I always wanted to. And then I think it was like 2017, I was like almost burnt out just trying to be everything to everyone and trying to make everyone happy. And I was just like, man, I just want to not do all of this. I just want to have a small boutique office, no associates, and I just want to do cosmetic and that's it. And so I made that change like in 2017, 2018, where I started dropping off insurances. I sold, I didn't really sell the office or the charts, but it's just kind of like sold the finish out, I guess you would say, just the office equipment and the build out. So that wasn't a very like a profitable transaction, but it did give me that mental clarity to have less things on my plate. And then I just started focusing on cosmetic. I started social media, branding myself more. Actually, prior to that transition completely, I started to work on my marketing, my presence, my social media brand, things like that. And then yeah, so it's been like 7, almost 8 years of just doing cosmetic only. So like I said, starting off, it was a small percent, then that grew, but it was never like 100% like what we do today.
Honestly, there's so much in there that we can unpack, but really what I wanted to go to is I actually find it really funny that everyone tends to like do everything all at once. I talk to clients all the
Yeah.
time, and it just so happens that people get married, they have kids, they buy their first house, they start a clinic. It's usually all within like 5 years.
I was
But
gonna
you
say
did it in like a week, right? I remember
yeah.
you saying that literally everything fell in like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
very, very short time span.
Yeah.
Was that intentional or just random luck?
I think how it just happened, I got married in dental school, so that was like the end of my junior year, and then we're talking about a year after graduating, so within like that's right about a 5 year period. I think it was like finishing school, starting your new life, right? As a professional, and then me and my wife both grew up in Houston, and we wanted to try something different. And so we moved to Austin, which is still close enough to Houston, where we're close enough to our family, but still far enough away. And yeah, we just want. I think we're just ready to embrace life and embrace this new chapter in our life. And then yeah, and then along the way, we were expecting, but yeah, just a lot of things at once. But in the when you're in the moment, you're like, oh my God, how's this all going to work out? But it all worked out for sure.
That's awesome,
Yeah.
Vegas. So it looks like you like to make, sometimes you're forced to make big decisions, and that's kind of one of the hardest things is, you had to make all these decisions all at the same time, and then at some point in your career as well, I'm sure you were doing really well, having the two practices and doing the general dentistry, but you just saw a different vision, which a lot of people do see, but it's kind of hard to take that big step of, you sold the practice and you kind of made this small boutique practice. So kudos to you. It's a very, very hard thing to do, obviously. Um, what was your, I guess, early on in your ownership career, uh, like did you kind of always have this vision, or did you kind of mention that you started as a general dentist, and then did you kind of almost get stuck into the grind of things essentially during that period of time?
Yeah, and I think the challenging part is like we were, there was a point where I mean, we were doing well, and but I was just like overwhelmed, and just I feel like what I didn't do is have a good management team in place.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
think if I had that level, that would have helped because not everything would have came up to me, if that makes sense, So it was like,
Yeah.
doing clinical dentistry, like working with associates, working with patients, working with like this huge team, going between two offices, and then still handling like HR and, like other issues. So it was just like very, very overwhelming. And I almost felt like, this is a point where I think a lot of people were getting into multiple locations and still to this day, But, early in those days with the idea that, oh, I'm going to build this and like, I'm going to get to three, four practices and then sell off and, have a bunch of money or what, whatever the motivation is. And so I just really started to do some soul searching and be like, is this what I really, really want? Like, I think about sustainability a lot, like what's sustainable. Like, I could fire at all cylinders for like a good amount of time, but then do I really want to do that for like 10 years? Because I'm probably going to burn out or something's going to give, right? Something either physically, emotionally, spiritual, something's just going to give. And so it was just, I was at, I wouldn't say like a breaking point. I was just feeling myself like bringing homework so much. Like I was always complaining about work and it was like so repetitive that my
Mm.
wife was like, well, what do you want to do? Like, you keep talking about, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go back to like, just, what I originally thought I wanted was a small boutique office, cosmetic only, a handful of employees, and that's it. And just like simplify and edit out all the things I didn't want to do so I could focus on what I really truly was passionate about and what I truly wanted.
Yeah. I find it so difficult to make that decision because again, I'm going to make an
Mhm.
assumption here, just based on what Ricky also said as well, is you're probably doing well. And it's a little bit like golden handcuffs where you're like, okay, I'm making good money,
Yeah.
but maybe I don't have the time at home I want. Like if people are watching this on YouTube or wherever, they could see you're a handsome guy. You do not look your age. You are
Thank you.
still, it sounds like you're still on wife number one. Your
Yeah,
kids
I
have a
know.
good relationship with
Yes.
you. Like
Yeah.
something has to give. And there's this inflection point where, yeah, you could have all the success in the world financially, but at the cost of what? Of your health, your relationships, and all these things. And so, like, I commend you for making that decision because there's a lot of people who cannot or will not make that decision because those golden handcuffs are just a little bit too tight. The money's just a little bit too good. And it's like when you made that decision to go, okay, I'm going to simplify my life and I'm going to go into a smaller practice, potentially make less money. When you were making that decision, were you thinking, okay, maybe the sale of my clinic will help float me for a little while I build my practice? Or were you
It,
thinking, well, I can just ramp up my production and I have patients ready to go on the cosmetic side to get me going? What made you be like, okay, I can make this jump financially?
and make it work. So the sale of the practice really wasn't, if there's anything I would learn, there was like it really wasn't significant at all.
Mm.
If so there wasn't like, hey, like all of a sudden I had this like huge cash flow. It was like I took that and literally turned around and paid off debt,
Wow.
I
Okay.
mean, which is helpful, truly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like this all of a sudden like huge cash flow or liquid event that helped propel me to something else. It was more of like I'm in crisis, not crisis mode, but I'm supporting these two businesses that are profitable, but I could be a lot more profitable if I focused on one office, lowered my overhead, and then also focused on like my highest like most profitable procedure that I love doing. And so when I thought about numbers that way, I was like, well, I'm gonna reduce my expenses and then I'm gonna focus on filling my schedule with this high-end procedure. So on paper, it should be a win-win. And I had a couple of colleagues, like a little mastermind group of me and like two other dentists, and they each had like really high-end implant practices. And I thought, well, they have one location, they're crushing it. Their margins are insane. Like they're doing really, really well and super humble guys. And I was like, we sat down and we were just like comparing numbers and apples to apples. And I walk in there and like, yeah, I'm like, got two practices. I'm doing really well. And then I looked at their numbers. I'm like, man, I'm nowhere close to this. And so it really, really made me think like, okay, like there's different in dentistry. The beautiful thing about there's different ways to earn an income, make a living, earn money, and do work, right? And there's different models. And so I thought, okay, like let me focus on instead of having an implant practice, which I was trying to do like when I had the two offices, I was trying to do
Mm.
an implant practice with a cosmetic practice and an Invisalign practice, all these things at once. And then even with our branding and messaging, it's, you're paying for, say, for example, AdWords, what you're going to pay X for implant, beginning implant positioned, and then cosmetic positioned, and then Invisalign. And, you're like diluting this message, right? And so I think part of my clarity became like, okay, the more I can edit out, the more I can focus. They say like, deep and narrow versus, wide and far kind of thing. So I just thought like, okay, let me just focus on this. And then another thought, this is again 7, 8 years ago, was like, we were doing Invisalign, like a ton of Invisalign. And then a lot of the corporate offices came up. And then
Mhm.
it was like, well, am I going to try to compete with them on price with Invisalign? Because, they have those advantages. And so I really just started to see the writing on the wall and said, like, you know what, this is what I'd love to do. If I can fill my schedule with this, instead of doing like, say, one veneer on 10 people in one day, what if I just did 10 veneers on one person? If that's what they needed and that's what they wanted, that could like clean up my schedule. I don't need to have an insurance person. I don't have to have all these multiple team members. And so it just started to make sense once I started to like run some numbers and also like kind of piggyback on what my other two friends were saying about their practices. I was like, I could, if this could work, this could really work. But if it doesn't, I always thought I'll just go back. I'll just go back to doing general dentistry. We started, one of my friends, he was a fee for service practice, had never been on insurance in his life. And so I was like, it's possible. That's the other thing too. Like sometimes we don't realize, I'm not saying what I'm doing is for everyone, but if it shows people, hey, this is possible, that's actually, it goes from no longer being like, oh, there's nothing out there like that to like, oh, actually this guy's done really well and it's possible. I still meet people to this day who are like, I tell them about my practice. They're like they literally look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, so that's all you do? I was like, yes. They're like, you don't have a dental hygienist? I'm like, no. Do you have this? I'm like, no. It's just like I literally eliminated and edited out all the fluff, all the excess, all the stuff I didn't want to do. And so now we just focus on our one thing.
That's really, really cool and rare. And yeah, I'm sitting here as well. I'm one of those dentists that's like, is that really what you do? But it's true. It's completely possible. Obviously, there's a service for everything, right? So it's amazing that you've been able to capture that. So the next thing I was going to ask you was like, do you even have hygienists? You mentioned that you don't even have hygienists. It's completely what you focus in on. So what's your, I guess, for the dentists out there, I'm sure they're interested, is what's your day or week like, I said, clinically or whatever it may be.
So over the years, I've gone from like 4 days a week down to just I'd say about the middle of last year we started to go down to three patient days a week, and that's I mean that's a lot. We even though we were seeing patients 3 days a week, or at 4 days a week prior, like we're doing a lot of dentistry. Like we're doing a
Yeah.
lot of big cases. So I usually like to see like one big case in the morning and one in the afternoon, and then that's like my doctor column. And then on my second column with my assistant or treatment coordinator, she'll do like post-ops and consults and things like that. So I still hop over a little bit here and there, but it's just mostly focusing on either two, if not maybe three medium-sized procedures every day, but or two really big ones. So we just again, we're very like high, very like high production practice, but just low volume with patients.
Yeah, super efficient, obviously, as well, which
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, that's really really cool. So I guess in terms of your patient pool as well, like how have you been able to? Obviously, that's one of the biggest things is finding the patients, and obviously they're all out there, and there's a lot of people doing veneers and cosmetic work, uh, and I know you do a lot of travel. Patients come in from other parts of United States, whatever it may be. What would you say your ratio is from like patients that are local to people coming in from the outside as well?
I'd say like probably about 60% are local and
Mhm.
40% either fly in or drive in from a different
Uh,
city. So
That's awesome.
it's a pretty significant amount. It's more than I ever thought it would be. It was never my intention to become like a destination. My goal when I started with one of my social media managers, when I started to make that transition to cosmetic only was, I told her, I was like, hey, look, I want to become the go-to guy in Austin for veneers. That was my goal.
Mhm.
It's like I would be happy with that. And then we started to become the go-to, and this is for social media specifically. So then
Yeah.
we started to become the go-to person in Austin, and then we became like one of the go-to people in Texas. And then with social media, like I think the inflection point was like we're in Austin, and then Dallas is probably, like an hour flight slash 3.5 hour drive. We had a patient reach out through social media from Dallas and say, hey, I was thinking about going to LA or Beverly Hills to maybe get my veneers done, or I could come to you. And if I come to you, if there's an issue, I know it's easy for me to drive back and forth. And so once that happened, I was like, what? Like, like there's a lot of dentists in Dallas, and there's a lot of dentists on the way from Dallas to Austin, but yet she's choosing us for some reason, right? Or leaning toward. I mean, she ended up going with us, but um I was like, wow. So I feel like there was this just, it was never the intention, but now obviously like we've embraced it. Now it's like, okay, how can we like cut out these barriers, right? Like, people are like, oh my God, you have to come in like 10 times an 8 hour appointment, whatever to like get stuff done. And we're like, okay, no, no, no. Like, how can we streamline this process? Like, we think out of the box. Like, we do tons of things virtually, like either just through FaceTime. And then we send patients impression kits, like Smile Direct Club started years ago,
Yeah.
and we get models before we even start. And so, there's a lot of things we're doing just to ease the process. We have our fees out there, like we're super transparent, like
mhm.
so we're just really trying to eliminate barriers. And I really think that's what has really crossed over state lines, of like people be willing to travel because they're like, well, all I need to know is right here. And then on social media, they get to see me or my team, and they're like, well, this person seems very relatable or personable. And they see our work. And so I feel like it was this perfect storm on social media of like, we show our work, we show that we're good at what we do, we're relatable, and we're super transparent about the process, like our fees, like like we're just
Yeah.
out there, and then we put everything out there. And I think that was just the perfect storm for people to be like, okay, like yeah,
I find it really fascinating that y- you just like when you were going through school, did
Mhm.
you think that your practice is going to be generated off of like social media? Like that
No,
probably wasn't even close to what you thought was going to be the case. And
no,
it's
I
like,
mean, I think a goal early on in my career, like in dental school, I had probably had no
yeah.
clue, I think that I just assumed things, like, of course I'll be busy, when I become a dentist, then it's like, oh, you got to market, you got to learn business, you got to learn how to run a team, like all these things that are so essential. But I really thought like I'd probably focus a lot on word of mouth
Mhm.
like coming out of school, starting a business. And we still rely on word of mouth. And I think part of the social media is it's the new word of mouth, but then also, we'll have people like a woman from Florida come in and we're like, how'd you hear about us? She's like, well, my hairdresser, who's also from Florida, came to you and got their smile done. And yeah, I get to look at her smile and I love it. And I've seen your
That's
work,
awesome.
so it's just like it's just so crazy how small the world is.
Yeah, and to make that transition from that general dentistry practice to this super niche, super lean practice, because it sounds like you guys are focused on operational efficiency to a high degree. When someone comes into the clinic, you don't want there to be a question of are you going to accept the case? It's just what are you going to accept in terms of treatment
Correct.
plan
Yeah,
is
yeah,
what it
yeah.
sounds like. You're doing all the work up front. Pricing's
Mhm.
not an issue. Like they're ready to go when they get into the
Yeah.
clinic. And so, how do you get them into the clinic right now? What is the quote unquote secret sauce? Is it a combination of paid outreach and advertising along with organic social media presence, or is it almost purely social media presence and word of mouth? How have you been able to attract the
Yeah.
types of patients that you're attracting?
I mean, all that's super important, right? Because like a lot of people want to learn how to do veneers or do veneers, but then they're like, they don't do cases, right? And so for us, like our number one referral productivity source is Instagram. And on Instagram, it's I would say 80 to 90% of it is organic just through posting, and then about 10 to 20%, depending on the time of year or season or year, if I'm like boosting a post or doing an ad, things like that. But I'd say the majority of it is organic. The second biggest referral productivity source for us is word of mouth, which is always great because the ROI on word of mouth is insane, right? Third would be TikTok. We have a huge
Cool.
presence there, and the return on that is actually pretty amazing too because I don't really run ads on TikTok. It's just all organic content. And then I would say Google, or as SEO is after that. We've kind of dabbled with Google AdWords, and I feel like it can be good, but veneers is such a competitive keyword that I mean, I feel like we would just have to spend so much money to like, make a dent in that universe. So, um, I'm a big fan of books, but I really enjoyed the Blue Ocean strategy. I don't know if you guys have read that, but
Hmm. Yeah.
so when I was thinking about strategies, right, for marketing and being cosmetic, the Blue Ocean became social media. And this is like 5, 6 years ago. And so not as many dentists were on there, not as many cosmetic dentists were on there. I mean, TikTok was a wide blue ocean for us. We were early adopters. That was a truly the definition of a blue ocean for us. But I would say, Instagram, word of mouth, TikTok, Google, so influencers that has helped over the years as well. But I'd say, word of mouth and social media are probably our top two that have driven the majority of our business.
Mm.
That's really cool. That's awesome. And I would say just as well to kind of almost backtrack on that as well. How did you, you kind of had mentioned that, you kind of have to learn, or if a lot of people learn how to do veneers, but they don't actually get to do them. What was your training like in terms of cases? Something that you kind of just did every once in a while in your practice and then, picked up the skill, or did you do a few courses here and there to up your skills in that as well?
So like early on, like a year out of dental school, I went out to the Las Vegas Institute, LVI, and I
Yeah.
started to learn some cosmetics there. I kind of went all over. I mean, I learned because the foundation for what I do still is general dentistry too, right? So I have to
Mhm.
understand like how implants work and how, if we're going to move teeth or they're going to have teeth moved by someone else and then we're going to, so I did a ton of training a lot of training in implants, oral sedation, Invisalign. And then I did a lot of DSD, digital smile design type stuff with Christian Coachman. Took a bunch of his courses. And then just, yeah, just a lot, a lot of like, I hate to say trial and error or, looking at cases, what could be better. I've worked pretty intimately with the dental labs I've worked with, and I've actually like
Mm.
not taking courses with them, but I've learned so much from them, if that makes sense, just going through the process with them of doing these cases and delivering these files. So, but yeah, I feel like I've done a lot of things over the years that have really helped
Yeah,
me kind of get my style, my signature down.
exactly. You put a bunch of things together. There's not a secret recipe or some secret sauce that you kind of get from one course. It's putting that all together and incorporating that into your style. And I like that you mentioned as well that you give a lot of credit to your lab as well because, they do so much of the work as well. And I think where, a lot of these cases maybe don't go as planned is the communication with the lab, having the right relationship, knowing which lab can take that case to the next level essentially. So I like that do you deal with multiple labs, I guess, or do you have a
Yeah,
single lab that you kind of deal with?
yeah, there's two main labs I work with. They're both out of California. One is
Mhm.
Williams Dental Lab, and then the other one is Reliance Dental Lab. And I've worked with the Reliance Dental Lab for like almost 20 years, and then
That's awesome.
Williams Dental Lab probably for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. So you have a great
Yeah.
relationship obviously with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I still think like sometimes, it's like it's a relationship, right? So it's like highs and lows, and like obviously
Yeah.
I'm sure there's times of frustration and things like that. But overall, yes, it's a net positive, relationship with both of them.
I was gonna actually ask about cosmetic dentistry as a whole. Obviously,
Yeah,
blown up in recent years. And again, I don't want to age myself, make myself sound too young, but this trend towards cosmetic dentistry and aesthetics, it is new relatively, right? Speaking like before, when you were coming out of school, of course, people were doing it, but not to this level. And so, what makes you confident that this is here to sort of stay and it's not just a trend where veneers and all these things are cool right now, but in a couple years from now maybe people are going towards other treatment types or maybe moving away from a certain type of aesthetic? Like what makes
yeah.
you feel confident you're like, okay, I can do this for a long time and it's here to stay? Because obviously there's a lot of trends that sort of come and go, especially in healthcare and aesthetics and what people want to look like and what they want their face to look like.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, I feel like, cosmetic dentistry has been around for a long time. I think it probably started like in the 80s and then got like, more popular in the 90s and then more kind of public in the early 2000s with a show like Extreme Makeover and
Mhm.
like things like that. And then so say if we use that as a reference line, that's 20 years ago, 20 like 25 years ago. And so there I feel like it used to exclusively be just like any cosmetic procedure for a select group of people, maybe of wealth.
Mm.
Like, we're talking like plastic surgery, cosmetic dentistry, things like that. More elective procedures, right? And I think with with costs coming down, the availability of things, materials changing, it's now become a more broad base of people interested in this procedure who could now afford this procedure and work with this procedure. I do feel like the trends in cosmetic dentistry, there will always be a certain style or looks that may be more popular than others. I always tell patients like we all have friends who may have cosmetic dentistry or cosmetic work done, and they kind of want everyone to know about it. And that's fine. It's their personal choice, right? There's a lot of subjectivity in beauty and aesthetics. But I feel like cosmetic dentistry will be around as long as people want to look younger and look better. And so I feel like that to me makes me think, and it might be. I think it'll be veneers. I mean, someone would come out with like a world class whitening that, veneers maybe become like more obsolete over time. But I think if as long as, materials are going to change, being more conservative in our treatments is going to, maybe being more non-invasive. I think that's going to trend upwards. Going more natural in appearance, I think, is going to trend upwards. But I still think as long as filters are around, and as long as social media is around, and as long as there's celebrity, and I feel like people aspiring to want more, I feel like cosmetic dentistry will be around for a while. I'm not saying I agree with everything, but I
Mhm.
do think it'll be around for a while.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we're
Yeah.
having that conversation because I like obviously I agree because I'm like as long as individuals want to improve themselves and their appearance and all that, you will have a place in the world.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
interesting because it's going to change a lot and what, might be popular today might differ in a few years. So you almost have to keep reinventing yourself
Yeah.
within the same specialty.
Yeah. Like 10 years ago, I was like, or 8 to 10 years ago, I remember talking to like a guy who was doing my SEO or something like that. And I was like, I think veneers are going to be like like Botox. And so, there was an inflection point where Botox became just so normal. Like everyone's getting Botox, right? Like, or now everyone is kind of doing some refresh and things like that. Even guys, even young guys, old guys, women, young, old, And I definitely feel like we're in that period right now where it's like everyone's getting veneers, like you had said. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But then the other thing, and this is unfortunate why I think cosmetic dentistry will be around, is there's a lot of work that's not great, that probably will need to be, maybe updated, refreshed in a couple of years and things like that. So I feel like the more of this product that's in the market, the more chances there are of people not being completely satisfied that may go back and, so unfortunately, again, I don't agree with everything, but unfortunately, that is a situation that will potentially keep cosmetic dentists busy for a little bit.
That is true. Yeah, it's kind of like clear aligners in a way, where it was
Mhm.
kind of limited to the scope of specialists for orthodontists,
Yeah.
but then it expanded to general dentists, and people thought, oh, like how is there going to be enough work for everyone? But it's been crazy. I mean, everyone's doing well. There's just the media and whatnot has been able to kind of push that, and I'm sure like a company like Invisalign has also helped push cosmetic
Oh,
dentistry in
yeah.
a way as well, right? Like it's spread a lot of awareness for that as well. So
Yeah.
is that because I know you mentioned that you used to do clear aligners as well. Is that something that you incorporate as part of your cases if need be, or do you just solely you let the patient know that they need to kind of correct this and then they can come back when everything's completed?
Yeah, we usually refer out. And
Yeah,
we could do Invisalign, and there's cases where we still may do it. But I work with some like great orthodontists in my area that it's almost just for our schedule, to be honest,
yeah,
like, to streamline what processes and procedures we do, and to excel at it. It's just like we've talked about about bringing it back. But we just then all of a sudden we get super busy and we're like, like we're what, we want to service these patients, and then like would we be providing them the best service that they can get? And if not, then
yeah.
let's give it to someone else. So we'll often refer patients out to an orthodontist, have them do Invisalign, and then when they're finishing treatment, they'll come back to us and then pursue veneers.
I love that. You've stayed super true to your efficient core. Like
Yeah.
it's so awesome that you've done that, because you could easily take those cases and obviously increase your production. But I like that you've stayed true to yourself, to your team, and to the process, which is really really cool. And obviously, I guess it works vice versa. I'm sure some of these orthodontists will refer you cases that
Oh yeah.
need finishing and stuff as well. So there's a lot out there, and we always, yeah, unfortunately, a lot of dentists have that scarcity mindset where they kind of have to do everything. But it's cool that you've been able to kind of get out of that and just solely focus on this one procedure essentially, which is great.
Yeah, like when I was initially like marketing my practice and thinking about how to market my practice, I definitely leaned on how like orthodontist and dental specialist and plastic surgeons like dermatologists, how they market their practice, like
That's
how do they get like word of mouth referrals, and they like, so I really like try to model after them of like establishing our practice as like a quote unquote cosmetic practice. And so yeah, and so we do definitely work with other specialists in order to like, get the results that everyone's
yeah,
happy with. Yeah.
that's cool. Have you done any crazy marketing? Like, you hear some of these different things, I guess, different ideas. Maybe going to like a bridal show, I guess in your case, or things like that.
Yeah.
Like, what have you done anything like that that you found has been different and it's kind of worked, or completely just did not work at all, maybe?
Yeah, I've done a lot of not work. Yeah, I've done a lot
Yeah.
of things that didn't work that I spent a lot of money on, and unfortunately, and like I've been doing this for 22, 23 years. And so, I've done TV segments, I've done radio, I've done like huge marketing magazine like, pieces. I've done my own magazine, mini magazine. So you name it, I've probably tried it. Um, but I will say some of the stuff we put out on social media is kind of, I wouldn't say crazy, it's just different. Like it's different that like not many people are used to seeing. So I feel like, but then also there's that not that it's just because it's crazy it works, it's just that we put out so much volume on social media
Yeah.
that I think that's definitely helped. But I've tried a little bit of everything, and most of the higher end expensive things weren't really worth it. Like when you think about like how much you're investing over time, like you have to get a really, really high return. When you compare it to things like word of mouth or even social media, like even having a social media manager that I would pay monthly, like our return there is still like, exponential compared to like a big magazine piece that I look like I'm the cover star or whatever, and then we get like maybe one thing out of it or something like that.
I'm just picturing you doing like a full-on magazine with you on it. Honestly, I think it would work, man. But I guess
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't get you the ROI that you need,
Yeah.
mostly for vanity play. But I wanted to shift gears a bit here because Ricky mentioned something about scarcity and how a lot of, you know, I don't want to say just dentists. I feel like this happens in other industries as well. It happens in my industry, it happens in any industry where people get into that scarcity mindset where they feel like there's not enough for everyone. You clearly don't have that because you've decided to start your own course and you're really
Mhm.
training other people on these cosmetic cases. What was the motivation behind that? Because you could, of course, just like kind of be like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I will continue retaining more patients. We both talked about how much work it actually is to create a
Yeah.
course. So, like, what was the motivation behind creating your courses and what made you actually start doing it?
I mean, COVID was like a big inflection point for us. That code during the pandemic, it got me on TikTok, got me to learn TikTok, it gave me the
Hmm.
time. And also just with that amount of time, we had started to become more and more active on social media during that time, prior to that and during that time. And then as we were posting cases, I'd have a lot of dentists reach out to me and asking questions. Hey, what glue did you use? Or hey, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? And so we were already like documenting our cases to post on social media. And since I had so many dentists reach out, and I was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna create a course, because I'm gonna create a course because I wish there was something out there like this, because there's not a lot of cosmetic dentistry resources out there for dentists, especially like newer dentists coming out of dental school. So I wanted to create something to be able to share my knowledge, but also like, I for a little bit I had, course on social media, obviously course on how to teach veneers, but I also kind of wanted to raise the bar a little bit. I wanted to like raise the game, like, like, let's I'm not going to say standard of care, but like what if we can start, like what if people, like what if there was no bad veneers out there and like people were happy with their veneers? Like that would help everyone out, right? So I just wanted to push the envelope. And then, part of it too, from a entrepreneurial aspect was, like e-commerce is kind of cool. Like having an online company with like little to no overhead, no employees, no rent, obviously, so things once I started to like look into it and dive deeper, I was like, this could actually be a kind of a cool like side business to like learn about and to actually execute on. And so, it started from a perspective of like, trying to help others and always obviously like, people are asking me, I might as well try to like, give back, but then also like, yeah, like why don't we just start charging as well? Because why not?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think like when it comes to these courses, the beautiful thing about them is that it's a lot of work up front, but then after that, it's you don't have to do anything to it again for a long time until it's time to update them.
Yeah.
So like on those lines, I'm curious, and I'm asking this almost selfishly. I'm sure people who are listening are going to want to know, how do you even go about starting to create a course? Because we talked about it offline. Like you have this information, this knowledge in your head, and you're like what was that? What was the first step? Did you just write down, okay, these are the modules, and then eventually I'm going to talk about these topics, and then how did you decide what you're going to record and what you're going to include? Like, how do you even get started? Because I feel like the logistics of just setting up a camera and all that, that's the easy part. It's the
Yeah.
figuring out what I'm going to talk about, how I'm going to talk about it, and like in what order I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much easier to think about like how you're going to do it until you actually do it, right? And
Yeah.
so like my newest course went through like many iterations of what it is. First it started off as like, oh, I'm going to just do like these two modules and then I'm like, well, I'm missing this. Let me add that. And so I have this like problem of like I just want to put so much into it. Like, you like vomit all this like information into like a course. And then, like we were talking offline, I have two daughters who are college students, and so I was, bouncing off ideas with from them about like, hey, because they actually helped me on my social media a lot, and so I was like, hey, I'm doing this and this course, and I'm going to launch it, and like, will you help me like audit it? And so one of my daughters was like, there's way too many words on the screen and you can't just read off what's on the screen. That's like a bad teacher, because they're in class, right? They're in class getting feedback from what they're hearing their teachers. And then, another one was like, where's your introduction where you're going to tell them what you're going to teach them? Where's the key takeaways at the end? And like so she helped me actually like organize the to like a proper course versus like a like vomiting of information. So that structuring of it, and I kept fighting her on it because I was like, I just want to get this out, like I was trying to hit a due date and like I'm like trying to get this out, but I'm actually really happy like looking back because she like really helped me organize things in a methodical manner, from a person's learning perspective, right? And so I took all that information and started to organize, into modules, right? Or into chapters. And then, each chapter has an introduction, it has the course material, has case reviews based on the information, and then key takeaways. And so basically we structured it like an official, like proper course, right? And so I'm the kind of person who can't sit and just off the top of my head, like vibe and flow and teach something while hitting like the 10 points. And so I basically scripted out like my whole course, brought in all the pictures if it's like case studies. And then I sat with my videographer and, basically I used a teleprompter in order to cover all the materials. That way, and also like I wrote it to where like it's how I would say it. Does that make sense? So it's not like
Yeah.
I'm like reading someone else's words. Like, no, I actually was like, I was producer, screenplay writer, lead actor, so it definitely was and is a lot of work putting out a course. Um, and I think it's just one of it's literally like, the course is 8 hours. So I feel like, I spent like 6 months of my life shooting, so we can make this 8 hour movie, which we're technically doing. And so if you think about it that way, like it has to be engaging, hopefully people learn something out of it. And, if it's entertaining and it keeps their attention, that's what's positive. So, it's definitely like a labor of love, I would say, but it's not as And it can be easy to some people, I think, but I think you just have to have that mindset of like a teacher and a student and how students could potentially learn. And then just being very, very organized in the process of how you're teaching, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's really cool as well. And even before that is one of the biggest things is, we all have kind of imposter syndrome. We're always thinking, oh, like who's actually gonna, watch or listen? Like me and Gertesh talk about this all the time. We're like, who's actually listening to this podcast? And it's funny, like over the weekend I had it was just a community thing, and a kid came up to me and was like, oh, like, are you Dr. Ricky Hamami? You guys do the podcast? I was like, there's actually somebody else other than us two that actually listen to this. It was kind of cool. But
Yeah.
how did it's interesting to kind of what was your mindset? I guess like did that ever go through your mind of
Oh,
who would
yeah.
who's going to be watching this? Am I even like capable of doing this? Do I have the right allocates or whatever it may be to be able to kind of accomplish this? And how'd you get past that? That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% believe imposter syndrome is real. I mean, literally, we have people flying in from different states to get their veneers done, and so I'm like, are you sure? Like, I mean, well, I know we can do it, obviously,
Yeah, of course.
but
Yeah.
it's just one of those like. Like that imposter syndrome is real, man. Like especially with teaching. I feel like
Mhm.
part of me is like, who am I to say something like, or who am I to teach? And then I think I was reading somewhere, and it was about like, online courses and stuff like that, or just courses in general. Is they were saying like, out of say 10 people, like if your life experiences and your knowledge has, if you're in that if you know more than seven of those people in that group of 10, like those are the people who are going to benefit from you. There's obviously people out there who probably might not need to hear what you have to say because maybe they're at a higher level, but
Mhm.
still, like, if there's 70% of the people that would actually like listen to you and you've learned that you can actually help them, then I think about that, right? So then I think about like, oh, like, yeah, I mean, then you have to kind of like go back and like think about, okay, all the things you have done, right? So like,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
all the things you have done right or wrong, but that you've learned from, right? So like, 20 years of being a dentist, 20 years of being a practice owner, 20 years of doing cosmetic cases and, the ups and downs of that. And even, learning like the highs and the lows. Like, so there's all this wealth of knowledge and experience you have, right? And then it's just a matter of how do you articulate that, like in a course, right? But I feel like, I mean, we're all over social media. I feel like imposter syndrome is still real. Like, like we get like dragged in comments, like, but it is just what it is. I think when you put yourself out there, be it in a course or on YouTube or on a podcast, like you just open yourself up to, these outside influences. But I think just, you being true to like what you're doing and your reasoning and your passion for it, like that carries over beyond other things.
You're right. You got to block out all the bats of all
Oh, yeah.
negativity. You're right. Because I
Yeah.
mean, even like a athlete and stuff. LeBron James, he's done everything that he's could have. He's done
Yep.
everything that he can. He always gets hate, right? So that is very true. It's good to kind of be able to kind of get over that essentially. And then one other thing I wanted to touch on as well. Obviously, you're very mentally resilient as well. With cosmetic patients, everybody knows that it's a big procedure. You're doing quite a bit to the facial aesthetics of a person. It's not like you're just doing a class two on the back molar or anything like that where you can't really see it. It's a pretty big procedure. How do you deal with patients? There's obviously a wide array of patients. Some that are super chill, super easy. They kind of go with the flow. They like what you give them. How do you deal with the more difficult patients? Because I find that's one of the biggest things that kind of puts people off cosmetic dentistry as well. Or they'll do a few cases, they'll have that one patient, and then it kind of just completely deters them from kind of
Yeah.
pursuing that as well.
I mean, I definitely try to slow things down when I have a patient who is giving signs that it's going to be a more challenging of a case. Be it that their expectations or the way things are progressing. So I'll potentially, for specifically for a cosmetic case, maybe work out as many issues as I can in the temporaries prior to moving forward. It's almost like,
Gotcha.
I then start to create a lot of more stop gaps in between steps to make sure, hey, we're good here. Okay, now we're gonna, oh, hey, we're good here, and just making sure like I document as much of that as I can when I communicate to my lab. And then so we methodically have like, a wax up based on their goals and our design. Then we have, them in the temporaries and we try to get their approval. And then, we send tons of photos to our lab. As well as get feedback from the patient even after, if it's a traveling patient, after they've left, about their temporaries and what they like or they dislike, so we can make those changes for the permanents. And then, even in the permanents, we show them on the model, then we try them on their teeth, take lots of photos, let them take a look at the try-in just to make sure we are 100%. So, I've had to cut off my own porcelain on cases that I've done, and that's like one of the most painful things ever.
Yeah.
But it happens, like you do things
Yeah.
long enough, it just happens, like I think, a lot of people assume with social media like everything's just perfect all the time, and that's not the case. Like there's
Mhm.
times when I had to send a case back to the lab, even though I have a great communication with my lab. I had to send a case last week because I just thought they'd want to go smaller in a different color, like, but we didn't bond it in, so that's good. And sucked to have to tell the patient to come back. Thank God they were local. But at the beginning, if we're getting the sense of like, hey, and we do a lot of redo veneer cases. So from the get-go, we're trying to tell people, hey, like this might take an extra step just to get it
Yeah.
right. Obviously, and sometimes I think it's easier when it's like clear to see what they don't like. But sometimes you can't see what they don't like. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah. No, you're.
because if you're saying longer, how much is longer? I want
Mhm.
my teeth longer. I want to show more teeth. Well, how much is that? And then, I want my teeth brighter. Well, how much is that? So like there's things that we have to like work on helping patients articulate in order to make sure that the vision of what they see and what we see like match up. But difficult, challenging cases, I would say I try to like slow down. We have these systems and processes, but I try to really try to slow it down as much as I can throughout the process to make sure like by the end we're like good.
Yeah. I guess you acquire that with experience as well. You pick out the red flags and whatnot, and that's something that you pick up over time. I'm assuming in some cases you might just not even accept as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's usually sometimes nicer to sleep at night rather than taking that
Yeah.
case.
There's cases I've done where I'm like, damn, I wish I never did that one. Like, like there's cases that we'll never post, like we're just like
Yeah.
based on what they're wanting and the look that we got at the end, it's just not my favorite, but they're
Mhm.
happy, you know. But cosmetics, I tell people all that, I tell my patients this too, like cosmetics there's a lot of subjectivity to it. Like I know there's like objectivity and like facts and proportions and things like that we use to
Yeah.
guide us, right? But it's their style, they're wearing it, and obviously functionally and clinically it has to be like impeccable, but like there's a lot of subjectivity to beauty. And we can see like how people look if they get cosmetic work. There's a lot of subjectivity of what people think looks good, right? And so I think we really try to focus on communicating and listening up front at the very beginning, just to make sure like we're on the same page the whole time, right?
I'm gonna take this in a completely different direction because I
No, go
just
for
realized you're from Texas. Have you ever done grills?
it. Oh, grills.
Yeah.
I thought you were
Have
going
you
to say
have
my
you done?
name. I thought you were going to say
No,
my name because
no.
my
Have
name,
you ever done grills yet? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Not fixed grills like grills that we would glue in, but like removable grills. Yeah, I've done a couple of them.
That's really funny. I have a client here in Vancouver,
Okay.
and no one does grills here. Like there
Okay.
no one does them. And he's
Does
like,
he do it?
I'm gonna become the guy who does grills. And we all just like laughed at him, and like
Yeah.
I honestly laughed at him too. I was like,
Yeah.
to what patients? They don't exist here.
Yeah.
No one does them.
Yeah.
He's like, you just watch, man. I'm gonna be the first guy who does grills. So
Yeah, it'll take. I mean, there's a you'd be surprised what people are interested in,
Yeah.
or will pay for electively, especially if people have the means.
Yeah.
Will find
Mhm.
ways to spend their money, and it could be a removable grill that they would wear on a weekend out, on a night out,
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
was thinking of Paul Wall, admittedly,
yeah,
while you
yeah.
were
Oh yeah,
talking.
yeah.
It's like, I was like,
Oh,
you're in Texas. This could
yeah,
actually be the thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I thought we were actually gonna like do a little spin-off side, kind of like mini business of doing grills. I just felt like and we weren't doing like real gems and like precious, crazy precious metals. It was more just like cubic zirconia, like, but still that stuff that looked really cool. But
Hmm.
the price point we would charge wasn't that high. But just the manufacturing of it, the lab, and like like it was just costly compared to what we would actually charge. So
Hmm.
I didn't pursue it after that.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I wanted to shift gears here and kind of get wrapped up here. And I wanted to talk because we've talked a lot about, where you've come from, what you're currently doing today. What would you say is next for you in your practice, both let's say clinically as well as the continuing education and course side of things?
Yeah. I'll start off with the course side of things. The course side of things, that's like still a growing company, which is exciting. So, it's like, having a startup again, and then so that anything that happens there is like amazing and positive. It's like a new baby, like any little gesture is like amazing. So, from that perspective, I just launched a brand new course in January, so I was excited about that. And then course wise, I think eventually I've been really toying with the idea of like an in-person course versus just an online course. So that would be like phase two of what happens with my course company in the next, I would say, year or two. And then at work, we just went down to 3 days a week.
Mhm.
Um, I think just I don't I hate to say doing more of the same, but kind of doing more of the same of continuing to thrive at doing cases, but then also like I'm wanting to like just really dial in our aesthetics even more and more in what we do, so that creativity is kind of flowing again. And then we're working on raising our fees as well. So just and then kind of just working on systems, and I'm really trying to at work within my practice like build the machine to generate the consistent leads, because that's just a really dialing in the marketing, so we can potentially get booked out a couple of months and things like that.
Love it.
Not
That's
reach, and I
awesome.
don't really like I was like some people had asked me like we hit really big numbers like the past couple of years, and then last I mean I cut down my days, physically I was kind of feeling it, so I kind of like cut back a little bit, so I'm not trying to like drive my revenue numbers super high anymore, but that's another thing too. I kind of like we reached a bunch of followers on social media. We reached like really high revenues and high profit margins, and like there's a lot of big checks I checked off my list. And so it's less of the more and more kind of goals, and more of just the yeah, like we were talking earlier offline about like like stopping work at a certain time and like not carrying it over to a different like to dinner time, and like it's obviously like being more present and things like that. So those I would say are some more of my goals, or what's kind of coming up with surrounding my practice, and I think it kind of like is more taking care of myself kind of thing.
Yeah, there's like a refinement, is what I'm hearing, of like, okay, we're just going to get better at the things we want to get better
Yes.
at. Not necessarily, it's honestly, it's like a similar transition when you went from general to cosmetic. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, instead of going higher volume, lower ticket, we're just
Yeah.
going even lower volume, higher ticket, and it's
Yeah.
getting better and
Exactly.
better and better. And I love the answer that you said. I hate to say it's more of the same because it is
Yeah.
more of the same. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's repetition. What's that Bruce
Yeah.
Lee saying? I fear a man who's done one kick 10,000 times, not a man who knows 10,000 kicks.
Yeah.
It's like it takes a lot of kicks. It's boring. I'm sure if people watch you day to day, you're like, every day looks the exact same because I want to get that much better. And I can only get that much better by doing the exact same thing over and over and over again. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And Tejas, where can what is the course name? Where can people find you as well?
Yeah. So the course name, it's called the Veneer Blueprint course. And if people are interested in finding out more about my courses, they can go to drtejaspatel.podia.com. So that's information about the course. And then if they want to follow me on social media on Instagram, I'm at Tejas Patel DDS, and on TikTok, at Dr. Tejas Patel.
Awesome.
We'll definitely be sure to include all those in the show notes and everything so that people can connect with you, because they're probably listening or they're in the gym right now.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm not going to go follow this guy right now.
That's good. That's good. I guess we'll wrap it up at that there. Thank you, Tejas. Thanks so much for your time. This has been a great episode. I'm sure people will get lots of pearls from this. Everyone wants to do cosmetic dentistry, and obviously you've honed in on it and you're killing it. So that's awesome and nice to see. So there's obviously resources for people to go where they can check out, how you do things and whatnot as well. So it's great that you've been able to kind of share this through your course as well. And we really, really appreciate you jumping on the podcast with us.
Yeah, thank you guys both. Thank you.
And there you have it, episode 13 of the Dental Journeys podcast. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Patel, I've included all of his social media links and website in the show notes below. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.